States and Canada, where we're trying to establish gospel outposts. The Joint Mission Council is the one that kind of is between these two, that has both an aspect of world mission work and an aspect of home mission work. And the Joint Mission Council is made up of representatives from world missions and home missions. That makes sense. And also Wisconsin Lutheran Seminary, which has a group called the Pastoral Studies Institute. And so we are providing training for future pastors kind of in places throughout the world. So that's why I, as president of Wisconsin Lutheran Seminary, am on the Joint Mission Council and am here today to talk with you about that. So, oops. All right, now it's working properly. I know, but no, actually the top one is the one that's doing the right thing. So it's actually working the way it's supposed to. How about that? I mentioned the Pastoral Studies Institute. So that's Wisconsin Lutheran Seminary's institute where we train men to serve as pastors in cultures and places across the world. We support cross-cultural and people group ministry. We'll talk about each of these things in bold a little bit more. And then WELL's mission journeys. So first of all, okay, now it's backwards again. People group ministries. So what we mean by people group ministries is this, that we serve different people groups both here and in their country of origin. So for example, Chinese. We have someone who is serving a group in the United States and is also working with a group, that same man, with a group in China. So this has been really a neat thing to kind of watch how the Lord operates, that he gives us an opportunity here in the States that we get to then build on in a place across the world. So you see Chinese, Hispanic, Hmong, Korean, Liberian, South Asian, South Sudanese, and Vietnamese. Have a little more about each of those things as we move forward. So the PSI, the Pastoral Studies Institute, trains leaders around the world. So the white guys always kind of give themselves away as maybe not belonging in that other place. So on the left, picture in Vietnam, we'll talk more about that too, is Pastor John Bear. He serves as a member of the PSI team. It's a team of 3 at our seminary. Up in the right-hand corner, that is Pastor Sorum. That's a picture taken, I believe, in Ethiopia. And then Professor Wardell on the bottom. So all 3 of them are located at Wisconsin Lutheran Seminary as their home base. Pastor Bear works exclusively on these kind of efforts, whereas both Professor Sorum and Professor Wardell each spend 1 semester on campus at the seminary teaching and 1 semester some places across the world teaching. So Professor Wardell is teaching at the seminary this semester. Professor Sorum teaches in the 2nd semester on campus. So it's just kind of an interesting thing of a seminary in Mequon, Wisconsin, training people in Africa, in Russia, in China, in Vietnam. All of these places we have opportunity to have an impact. 22 Hispanic souls being served in Hispanic ministry, 109 congregations. I believe it's something like 19, I got to get the exact stat, 19 Spanish worship services held every weekend across the United States, about 2,200 souls. And I'll give you a couple pictures of them, I think. Yeah. So here is Santa Tomas in Phoenix, Arizona. Pastor Zimdars, Tomas Zimdars, do I have a... He's right there, and then we actually trained a man through the PSI standing in the middle to serve this people group in Phoenix. So there's the connection between the seminary and Hispanic ministry, even in the United States. Here is Christ in downtown Denver, pretty high Hispanic population. What's sort of interesting is that Denver is experiencing a bit of a upsurge in downtown, and so what had been kind of a low rent district now is becoming a high rent district. And the people that we have typically been serving at Christ in Denver, they can't afford to live in the area of the church anymore. So each weekend, Pastor Biedenbender, my kids, I was in Denver for 13 years before coming to the seminary, and some of the younger kids called him Pastor Peanut Butter. His name is Biedenbender. Peanut butter is the best you can get. So it's both, so he has a service in English and a service in Spanish every Sunday. There are also a fair number of black people that live in that area too. Oops. So he would have been, Tom Biedenbender was his father. Tom was a pastor in, okay. So one of the things that we do in supporting Hispanic ministry is congregations that have a Hispanic population around them sometimes reach out to the Joint Mission Council and say, could you provide some support for us on a short-term basis as we try to serve this community? And so a group in Waukegan, Illinois said, we've got an opportunity to help people grow in their English skills. It'll introduce us to the community, and we may have opportunities for gospel outreach. And so the Joint Mission Council gave them a 3-year grant, and now it's self-supporting as they're reaching out to their community. Here, Bethel in Menasha at Latino Fest a couple years ago, they are doing the same kind of thing, seeking to reach their community. Then there's work with the Hmong, and we have 5 Hmong congregations here in the United States and Canada that are now reaching also back to their country of origin, which would be like Vietnam and Thailand and Laos. And it's really just amazing. The more that you think about anybody who's a little bit older, to think that we're going to Vietnam with the gospel is just an incredible thing, and more on that in a moment. But here are some of the congregations. So Family Hmong Lutheran Church in Fresno, California. Emmanuel Hmong in St. Paul. This is one of our first ones. The man who serves as pastor of this group, Pastor Peng Mua, was one of the first to graduate from our Pastoral Studies Institute. So it was the Hmong that we served first. He serves as the chairman of the Global Hmong Committee as we seek to serve Hmong people here in the United States and in places across the world. Trinity Hmong, this is what it's called now. So First German Lutheran Church in Manitowoc saw the Hmong population in the area, tried to reach out to them, found a man to train. Thankfully, they decided to call themselves Trinity Hmong and not First German Hmong, because that might seem a little strange. So here you see their Easter service. They're worshiping in their gym because the church is being rebuilt. In Anchorage, Faith Hmong Lutheran Church, so another place where they just saw, here's an opportunity, let's try to reach out, and we have a trained man, a Hmong pastor, serving them. And here is the one that ties us most closely to Vietnam. So maybe you've heard this story because of the, you see up in the upper left, that was sort of an opportunity to give. We were asked by the Vietnamese government, communist Vietnamese government, to build a training facility in Hanoi. This is just shocking. Nobody else got asked to do this. They came, they visited with President Schrader, signed documents. We reached out to the Synod, and $2 million was given to support the building of it. Of course, COVID strikes, and we are stuck. Can't go over there to sign the papers that are needed to get the building project going. But it started with Pastor Lohr, who was in Kansas City, serving a Hmong congregation in Kansas City after he had been trained by the Pastoral Studies Institute from the seminary. He published his stuff online, And the Hmong Fellowship Church in Vietnam saw his stuff and said, we want you to come and teach us. So 4 times a year, he would go over and teach them. Well, after a couple of years of that, we as a synod called him to focus his efforts exclusively on that, and we called another person to be a pastor at the Hmong congregation in Kansas City. So he has accepted. Pastor Joel Nitz, missionary Joel Nitz, is right now learning the Hmong language, and when we are actually able to go and travel to Vietnam, we'll start building the buildings, and we'll go from there. So the Hmong Fellowship Church has about 220,000 people in it. So our synod, the Wisconsin Synod, is about, 380. So that's a pretty large group that we're having an opportunity to influence. And just an incredible story. He puts something on the internet, they find out, he goes back to his country of origin, and we'll just see where the Lord blesses. It may be that this window closes. Okay, well, it's worth a try, right? It's worth a try. See what the gospel can do in that place. Now, North American Asian ministry. So there are outreach opportunities to Chinese, Korean, and Vietnamese people. We just recently called a man to serve as a consultant for North American Asian ministry. Pastor Neil Burkholtz, who had served for 7 years in China, had to leave. They kind of forced him out. It was not safe for our missionaries. We don't have any full-time missionaries in China right now. It's just not safe. They know what we're there doing, and they don't want any part of us being there. So he was called to serve as a North American consultant for Chinese outreach, or for, I should say, Asian outreach. And he's actually going to be stationed at Reformation in San Diego, where there's an opportunity to start an Asian ministry there. So we have a Vietnamese ministry in Boise, Idaho. So in 1992, they started. There was a Vietnamese population near Nampa and Boise. And so started this group in 1995. Pastor Kramer, who is the man on the right, well, he's in the picture on the left, the pastor there, and he's on the right. He has been there his entire ministry. I think he got there in 1996. The 2 men on the left, Tao and Trung, both are training to be pastors and are taking classes from the Pastoral Studies Institute. So Pastor Kramer teaches some of the classes, but then it's the professors from the Pastoral Studies Institute that do it. And they regularly come to our campus, and the rest of our faculty has opportunity to teach them too in smaller segments. Korean, we have 2 places where we have Korean services happening. One in Des Moines, Washington, so south side of Seattle, and one in Las Vegas. We also have a ministry in Morton Grove, Illinois, that with 2 Korean teachers that are doing some work there too. So we have, 9 that are actively doing Chinese ministry. And I want to make sure that I get those to you. Let me look at my notes. Okay, so Chicago. So this is Pastor Gowell, who served for 6 years in China. Now is serving in Chicago, and there's a large Chinese population there. He's married to a Chinese woman. Over here, this is Luke Liu. He is in the Pastoral Studies Institute training to be a pastor. He's in Des Moines right now. Moran Chung Wang in Coquitlam, British Columbia. In a moment, there's Pastor Bear. And I'm not sure who that is. Sorry. All right, this one is just a great story. So we have tried as a synod to get into Vancouver, British Columbia on several occasions. So in the mid-70s, we had missionaries there for probably 5 years and couldn't get anything started. Then in the early 90s, we had a couple missionaries there again for probably 6 years, and that didn't take. So we started again in 2014, and some things are beginning to happen, and here's the cool one. So here is Pastor Chang Wang, who was ordained in January of this year. Here's how the story starts. He is a convinced Hindu, atheist, and he decides he's going to read the Bible to prove that it's bogus. So he starts reading the Bible, and he's reading Isaiah 53. You know, that one that we hear on Good Friday, he was crushed for our iniquities. You know, that beautiful picture. It's like Isaiah standing at the foot of the cross, even though he writes it 700 years before it happens. And he can't figure out what that's talking about. So he's got his Bible in his hand, and he's reading, and Pastor Courtwright on the left happens to be coming into the building where this guy is living, and Pastor Courtwright says, well, you're reading a Bible. What are you reading? And he tells him, I'm reading Isaiah 53, and I don't understand it. Could you help me understand what it's saying? Well, it's just like the story of Philip and the Ethiopian eunuch. Absolutely incredible. So Pastor Courtwright took that opportunity to begin to teach him, and Pastor Wang obviously changed his entire attitude towards Christianity, so convinced of its truthfulness that now he has become a pastor. So after 5 years of study with the Pastoral Studies Institute, he was ordained in January. And we have 3 years of funding, the Joint Mission Council does, to do work in Coquitlam, which is a eastern suburb. Well, there aren't any western suburbs of Vancouver, I don't suppose, unless you're out in the ocean. So he's working, obviously, now the challenge with COVID, how do you reach people? But he is working the field. Then Peace in Santa Clara, interestingly enough, has both Korean and Chinese outreach. So Pastor Paul, over up on the front there in the green shirt, is a Korean man, but they also have opportunity to serve in Chinese. And so the Joint Mission Council is working with them. Now, South Asian ministry. So this one is kind of interesting too. Several years ago, we had a man in Pakistan, Dr. Jordan. So he's a doctor, a medical doctor, but he would regularly hand out Christian material to anybody who came to his clinic. He reached out to the Wells for material that he could use. We shared it with him, and he shared it broadly. So broadly did he share it, however, that he put his life at risk, and he could no longer stay in Pakistan. So he came to the United States, and he completed the Pastoral Studies Institute, and his wife took many of the classes with him, Anila, and the Lord called him to start an international friendship center in Pewaukee, which is right next to, it's maybe 5 minutes away from the Center for Mission and Ministry, our synod headquarters. They just built at this church a large area that they can use to welcome people. And so the technique that Pastor Paul, so now he goes by Pastor Paul instead of Dr. Jordan, Pastor Paul, is that they go to the Hindu temple and they invite people over for supper and for Bible study, and they're just such positive, upbeat people that they do a wonderful job of friendship evangelism, bring them in. But you can imagine this is going to be kind of slow going. But with the gospel, the Lord can do incredible, incredible things. Here's another just kind of fascinating story. So we're not allowed to publish this on the internet or anything. So the man in the middle, his name is Shaquille, but we are only allowed to refer to him as Harris because we have to protect his life. It is not safe for him to have this be known what all he is doing. because Bangladesh is not exactly, encouraging of Christians. It is primarily a Muslim country. So Shaquille is in Detroit. He's a Christian, and he runs into Pastor Ryan Colander, and he asks to be instructed. So Pastor Colander takes him through an instruction class, and he says, "This is what I want to teach. This is what I want to preach." And so he begins to do some thinking about how could he serve as a pastor with people who have a Muslim background. Well, his father actually in Bangladesh had converted from being a Muslim to being a Christian and had opened a couple of Bible schools. His father passed away, and now it's sort of Shaquille's responsibility to run those schools. So we meet him in Detroit, and now we have an opportunity to go to Bangladesh. And not only in Detroit, we also have opportunity across the border in Windsor, Ontario. He has a home in Detroit that he invites Muslims to, helps them out in whatever way he can for the sake of sharing the gospel, and he's going to do the same thing there, as well as going back to Bangladesh. This is a man with high energy, and he's a man that when you're in his presence, you just go, wow, here is just a heart filled with the gospel, and it's kind of neat to watch. So Pastor Bear on the left, and on the right is Pastor Michael Duncan, who serves as our friendly counselor for South Asian ministry. So that's what I was just talking about, is that through Shaquille we have an opportunity to reach into Bangladesh. We've got schools already in place, and what we can offer in World Mission Fields above all else is to go and teach. This is the gift we can give, and we're taking advantage of the opportunity. So in Detroit, again, he's trying to help Muslims as much as he can for the sake of sharing the gospel with them. Now the Sudanese, another just fascinating ministry. So you think of, the Sudanese, pretty dark-skinned, right? And the places where we first met the Sudanese are in places like Des Moines, Iowa, which is pretty white. And Omaha, Nebraska, not as white, but still pretty white. And just kind of fascinating to see how this has happened. So 8 locations across the U.S. and Canada. So even in Vancouver, where we are doing English and we are doing Chinese, we are also seeking to reach the Sudanese. Vancouver is very much a kind of a melting pot. And maybe melting pot is not the right term, because everyone tends to sort of segregate where they are, except for those who come from India. They don't seem to segregate as much as some of the other groups do. Here is the man who was called to serve as the coordinator of South Sudanese ministry. So Peter Burr, his story begins. He comes to Omaha, Nebraska, and he's got a group of people that he is teaching as a pastor. He goes to Good Shepherd in Omaha with the thought of, could we use your church as a place to worship? Well, Pastor Ewert says, let's talk about that. Let's kind of go through an instruction course and see where we are, see if we are on the same page. If we are, then you absolutely can use this, and we will support this. So he goes through instruction, becomes member of that congregation, and Pastor Berg gets trained in it. Then he teaches his people in the Nuer language, and they all become members of Good Shepherds. He then goes through the Pastoral Studies Institute, gets trained to be a pastor, and the call comes, okay, you help us reach out to the South Sudanese in all of these different places. And one of them, I think this is the next slide, is in Renton, Washington, a suburb of Seattle. And the man on the left, so this is Pastor Burr right here. And right here, this is Pastor Simon Duath, who is our second Sudanese pastor. He also completed the Pastoral Studies Institute just this past year. And so this summer in July, was ordained and installed. The man over here on the right, since I mentioned him before, this is Pastor Joel Nitz, who accepted a call to go to Vietnam. He hasn't been able to go yet, so he's still in the state of Washington, awaiting that time to go. Professor Sorum, as I mentioned before, and then the two pastors in the area who had done a fair amount of instruction with Simon, Pastor Voss and Pastor Lang. They have been, they are safe. Yeah, it's a suburb, and so yeah, they've been safe. Thanks for asking that. And then, so how do you serve people from Sudan? Well, there are many that are in refugee camps in Ethiopia, Kenya, and Uganda. So this again is Pastor Burr, Missionary Burr, right here, and we are serving in. There's a refugee camp in Kakuma, Kenya, and in Gambela, Ethiopia, and so he is making regular visits to those refugee camps. And Professor Sorum has done that as well. I don't know, can you imagine, living for years on end in a refugee camp? This is just, incredible. And yet Pastor Burr has so many contacts in those camps. So the prayer is that when things calm down in Sudan, people can go back, and they go back with the Christian faith to share with others. We also have opportunity in Liberia. So a man named Matthew Cephas was in the Twin Cities, New Hope, Minnesota. They had been renting, he and his church had been renting a place, and they couldn't rent it anymore. They went looking for a church that they could rent, went to New Hope, Pastor Dennis Klatt in the back there. Could we rent out your church? Well, let's talk about it. Let's see what you teach and believe. Maybe you won't even have to rent it. Well, the man took instruction, said, I believe this, I want to teach this. So now in New Hope, Minnesota, we have the typical congregation. We also have this Liberian congregation. And he's got contacts in Liberia. We also have a man in Las Vegas who has a group that he's pastoring, has connections back in Liberia. So do you see how this works? We meet somebody here in the States, they have connections back in their country of origin, and then we take advantage of that, and World Missions goes and helps them. So we have, for example, this is John Hartman, who is a missionary to Africa. He is the outreach guy, part of One Africa team. So he's working with the groups in Liberia to bring them together and see what we could do to expand the ministry. The next thing that we do is support WELL's mission journeys. So these are short-term mission opportunities for a church to take advantage of. Go help another congregation. Sometimes it's just kind of informative to see what's being done in ministry in other places. So for example, it's one ministry, 2 sites in Rochester, Minnesota, Resurrection Lutheran Church, Life Lutheran Church, that took part in a mission trip to Escondido, California. And it's just a way to get out of your normal swing of things and then come back to your congregation with some new enthusiasm and excitement for ministry. 125th anniversary on the Apache Reservation. There was a group from St. Paul's Lake Mills that went out to do it. We provide training for that, and we provide debriefing when people get done. The chapel at UW-Madison sent a group to Colorado Springs. And here's an interesting one, too. So in the middle, Emily Kamm, right up here, she was a former president of the LWMS, and Mrs. Fry, former vice president of LWMS, made a trip to Russia to minister to and with them there. Just a great opportunity to see firsthand what's happening in missions. This summer, there was to be a Lutheran Women's Missionary Society convention, but COVID shut that down. There was to be on the Wisconsin Lutheran Seminary campus a big event having people come and hear about world missions. That got canceled too. So what happened was everything went online, and now it's all just kind of out there for people to watch. So wellstasteandsee.com has just a ton of different information you might watch. Videos of missionaries talking, some interviews with missionaries. Some are taken from their field, others happened here in the States. So take a look at that. There's more information about this on the back table in back. There's also, if you're interested in receiving more information, a sign-up sheet out on the table near the door if you would like to get more information. You can subscribe by wells.net. Subscribe. You can be regularly receiving emails. I'm on this list, and it's encouraging every time that I read what's being done. Facebook page as well. And there are copies of this magazine, Faces of Faith. Grab one. We'd rather not send them back. They're on the table right outside of the door. Oops, I thought there was one more slide. There it is. You'll also find a postcard on the back. So what can we do as we think about all of this? Let's continue to pray. Let's continue to share the information that's out there. Let's continue to learn more about what's happening in the fields, and let's support it with our offerings as well. All right, a lot of information, too much information. But that's what I was told I was supposed to do, give too much information. What questions do you have about all of that? Yes, sir. So the Joint Mission Council, we have, the World Mission Administrator, the Home Mission Administrator, the chairman of both of those. We've got about 10 people on the committee. The council, and so all of us try to get out at least once or twice during the year to share information like this. So so minimum of 20 times that this gets presented, and with some, like our world mission guy is out far more often than once or twice a year. Yeah. Excellent question, and it probably should actually be on this presentation. So we have a group that used to be called Multi-Language Publications. It's now called Multi-Language Productions because it's not just some print thing that we produce. We now produce a bunch of videos, and we do it in all different languages. So Pastor Nathan Seiltz, who has a space at the Center for Mission and Ministry, oversees the translation of lots of different materials and the production of videos, etc., that'll be useful in ministry efforts all over the place. So the number of different languages that we have, for example, The Promise, which is a simple gospel proclamation, I think it's like 55 different languages that we have that translated into, and he oversees all of that happening. So there's just a lot of material that's being shared. So for example, our One Latin America team, One LA, they are doing all of their stuff really online. They are reaching to places all over South America, Latin America, and they're doing it all online, and all of this material is being generated for their use. So it's kind of fascinating. You invite people to a class, and then if they kind of complete a class, then we send somebody to actually meet with the person and say, okay, what can we do about establishing something here to reach people in this area? So many opportunities. So the thing for us is to realize we don't have to reach everybody. Let's just do what we can do. And then we'll trust the Lord to reach others through other Christians. Thanks for the question.
You mentioned that was the Hindu atheist that was sitting and reading, so there must have been some language that he could read.
Right. So Chiang does speak some English. He's not as good as Chinese, his Mandarin, his native tongue. And so he is reading a Mandarin Bible, but he's able to communicate enough in English that when Pastor Courtwright, who doesn't know Chinese, doesn't know Mandarin, could say, "What are you reading?" they were able to communicate in English. Yes. No, and that is the fascinating thing, is that the Lord, it's His church, and He continues to build it. He just builds it in different ways and manners than we thought. And some of the things, the changes we've had to make, are actually changes we should have made a while ago, and we'll take advantage of those. Some of those things, there still isn't quite anything like being face to face with somebody. But in the interim, this works. Yeah, that's exactly right. We have a God that won't stop. Yes. Yeah, excellent. Okay, so up means backwards. One more. There it is. Wells.net mission journeys. And what you find on the site is a number of things that are being planned where volunteers could come. Some that need 2 people, some that need 10, all different kinds of things. And you can arrange a group from your congregation or a group from several congregations to participate. And so again, just really valuable. There aren't right now, I don't think, any international opportunities. There have been some in the past. Right now, those mission journeys are primarily North America, so United States, Canada. But in the past, there has been. And maybe once COVID is done and people can actually travel, it makes it better. So there's your answer. You're welcome. Yes, sir. Yeah, yeah. Right. Well, and here's the thing, right? I tried to emphasize but didn't do it as well as I could have. This whole thing of we find people here and it gives us opportunities to do things we couldn't have imagined. So let's be looking in our neighborhoods. Let's be looking in our community, in our county, in our region. Where can we serve? And who knows where this may go after it. But if I'm stuck in my house and I'm not going to talk to other people, now the gospel is going to be stopped in that insofar as my personal communication. But now we have to be creative. How can we reach people with the word? And I know this is a hard time for those who are serving as pastors because God's people aren't coming together for worship. And they completely understand why some are concerned about doing that. But it's just so hard because my job is to help people with God's word, but if I can't reach them, I don't know how I can help them. I can't visit people who are homebound because they're in a care facility and it's shut to the outside world. So we just keep doing what we can do, and we remember the Lord is the Lord of the church, and not we. Sometimes we need to be reminded of that. Okay. Who's that? Okay. All right. Well, I very much appreciate your time and your attention. Could we close with prayer? Lord Jesus, Lord of the church, you purchased us with your holy, precious blood. You did not die just for some, but you gave your life as an atoning sacrifice for all because you want all to be saved. We ask that you would, by your Holy Spirit, increase in us the desire that all would hear of you, believe in you, and live with you and us forever. And then we ask that you would make us bold to speak your word, to speak to those who are in our family and our close circle of influence as we proclaim the good news of what you have done. And then we ask that you would use us as your instruments in reaching out even beyond this. Bless our missionaries. Bless all of the efforts of our home missions and world missions and joint missions as we seek to carry out the calling you've given us. Bless us and keep us for the sake of your most holy name. Amen.